Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Michiel. My name is Shravan, and I am a researcher at Harvard Medical School. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about breakthroughs in neuroscience, rewriting the rules of marketing, and how I think that neuroscience is slowly entering into the public sphere. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering what the hell I'm wearing on my head, right? And I promise we'll get to that shortly. But today, I want to take you on a journey about my past experiences in the field, how I ended up here, and some of my conclusions about the future. I think there's a lot of research out there that is going to not only change the way we conduct business, but fundamentally how we communicate and interact with one another. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'll need the clicker. Thanks. So, about, I would say, 5 or 6 years ago, a company called Neuroware launched a new product. They're Japanese. They launched a product called the Neko Mimi Brainwave Cat Ears, which is an unmodified version of what I'm wearing on my head right now. And what you can think of this as is it's kind of analogous to the old mood rings that you would have in the early 2000s. It was supposed to sense your mood, and based on that, the ears would like wiggle around, move, kind of like they're doing right now, right? And tell you, okay, something like whether this person has high, focus or relaxation. And the neuroscience behind this was that there's a lot of electrical activity happening in our brains. We have signals flying around, and all of this can be picked up and translated into some data that can move the ears around, right? So their slogan for this product was lead the brainwave expression generation. As you can see, you got high relaxation, high interest, high focus, things like that. But to me, this was super cool, and as a neuroscientist, I really wanted to know more about this. So as any mad scientist, I took a hostage, and you'll see a little bit about how I tried this out. Just calm down, just like.
You can calm down.
Imagine yourself at the beach.
Yeah.
Does that work?
You're drooping. Oh, no, you're.
Am I sad now?
It's a little droopy.
Okay, think more about the ocean.
Now think about something cool.
You just scared her.
He hears your voice.
No, it's
I didn't even think about anything. You just surprised me.
Well, I know, but that obviously went super alert, see?
Ooh, what was I thinking about?
Ah, see, like that.
Tell us about your date.
So what I really like about this clip is that very last line, tell us about your date. And, this is my coworker, and she just realized that what she's thinking and all of her thoughts and stuff are suddenly out in the open. This device that I'm wearing, it's just a toy, but it's also a window into the mind, You can understand what a person's thinking and feeling just through something as simple as cat ears. So, I really like this, but, I had my own ideas about what to do with this. So I did some modifications, played around with it a little, and because I thought, there's a lot more I could do with this. So what I'm going to do right now is a slight demonstration. I basically modified this toy to allow me to play something, play music from my playlist using a microcontroller device. So let's see if this will work right now. The idea is to basically have some sort of mind-controlled device that, because it has multiple applications, but we're going to see if. So that's the calibration sound. I'm going to try to use my mind now to start some music. So let's see if I can. There we go. Okay. So anyway, so the way I managed to pull this off was I used a little microcontroller Arduino device. And the signal that my brain is firing around, I guess, was sent to this device. And then this device sent a signal to play music, right? But if you think about this workflow, it's really simple. You could really do more than just music. You could do anything. I mean, control a prosthetic arm, wheelchairs for the disabled. You could, turn on and off the lights in your home. maybe control your Alexa, all using your thoughts. This is essentially like a brainwave mind control device, right? And I built all of this for less than like $200. So the applications for this are enormous. And so I guess like, why am I doing this? Why am I here telling you all of this? My point with this presentation was to show you that, hey, neuroscience is here. It's not just something that's happening in like these high-tech research labs around the country or like deep in bunkers of like industries. This is something that's going to like, I guess, permeate into our everyday lives. And I think that all of you as CTOs, CEOs, and CXOs should understand that neural data is becoming more and more available to the general public, right? So in this talk, where are we going? Like, where is this leading to? I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the potential of neuroscience right now, how, I guess, like where we are in the field and like what new advances are happening and like how cool it can be. I'm going to talk a little bit about the hurdles that we need to come. There's a lot of technical hurdles, but I don't think you guys are interested in that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the societal hurdles and like what we as like a upcoming digital society need to embrace in order to get through this. And again, what the future holds, and I guess how we can really reach that utopia that we're all dreaming of. So, my interest in all of this really started when I was working in a social cognitive neuroscience lab. Right? So what is social neuroscience? It's essentially the study of like cultures and society and how our brains are really impacted by that. Can we predict social things, mob psychology, acculturation, things like that via neuroscience, right? And how we do this is generally through fMRI scanners, right? This is just a giant machine, it's a giant magnet that like scans your brain while you're doing something, So if one of you were my research participants, like I'd put you in here, scan your brain, and this would pop out, It's basically cortical activity in your head based on like what regions of your brain were active during some task, right? So the coolest study that our lab did using this technology was like a Chinese acculturation study. So we had a large population of international students in the area who were all Chinese, and we wanted to see, they were, like they've never been in the United States, they've never experienced this culture, and we thought it was a really great opportunity to see what would happen to their brains. Like, could we see changes in the brain based on just them entering the United States? So we took a lot of students. Some of them, embraced the U.S. culture. They became more and more Western. They adopted individualistic values, and some of them really like stayed within their own Chinese social circles. They ate Chinese food. They only had Chinese friends, things like that, and that's normal, right? So we scanned their brains, and we waited 6 months, right? And 6 months later, when we scanned their brains again, you could really see like these differences in the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, all these fancy regions in the brain that had really changed based on whether they acclimated into the US culture or whether they stayed in their own circles, right? And this is interesting because this is telling us that, hey, based solely on like living in the US, like your brain has actually changed. Now, I thought this was cool on its own, but what if we could go the other way? What if we could use some machine learning and some algorithms to see those changes? Like, the idea is, we could use algorithms, machine learning to track to scan these people's brains and tell them, hey, would you be able to acclimate into the US? Like, would you be able to like understand the culture and society there? So instead of having, I guess, a Chinese student living in China come to the US, I could scan his brain there and say, hey, based on all of this data we have, not sure that you'll fit in very well. Or, hey, based on all of this data we have, you'll fit in really well. But it wasn't until I started my project on transportability in this lab that I really understood, I guess, like the social impact that neuroscience could have in the public sphere. So what is transportability? Essentially, I wanted to know how, quote unquote, transported someone is while watching a movie or like a piece of media or a narrative film or whatever, right? When you're reading a really great book or watching a TV show, sometimes you kind of lose track of your surroundings. And that's what I wanted to measure. I wondered if there was a neural correlate to that. And my hypothesis, I guess, was to see if more emotion meant someone would be more transported, right? So, Study Forest. What is Study Forest? A neurorepository. It's essentially a giant circle of academics who all publish neural data on the movie Forrest Gump, right? And what's the advantage of this, you know? So if I want cardiac angiogram data correlated to my own behavioral data, like a lab in Paris here could provide me that while I'm all the way in the US. So it was a global network sharing all of this neural data, but it was mainly confined to academic circles. But I thought this was really interesting. You know, it's an entire network of scientists sharing all of this data just to get off one movie to I guess get different outcomes for all their different studies. So you know, I did my own study. I had this passive grip test thing that I developed, which basically was a measure of transportability. So if, for example, when you're watching the movie, I would ask my participants to really grip this little holder I made tightly while they're watching the movie. And the idea was during boring scenes, you know, maybe the beginning, something, they'd remember to do this task. They'd hold it quite tightly. But, you know, as we got into some of the more heavy stuff or the emotional things, they'd kind of lose track of where they are. They'd get transported and slowly let go, right? Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, Netflix and Amazon heard about what we were doing and contacted us, right? So, and you know, this was a big thing for me. This was important because this was the first time all of this neural data that we had was starting to seep out into more than just academia. Industries were getting interested in how, you know, what all of this was, because you know, these two companies, their objectives were to get all of their people, viewers. They wanted them to stop watching their Netflix originals or their Amazon Prime TV shows like this, and start watching them like this, right? So, this was this big first shift into neuroscience, to me at least, how neuroscience was slowly entering the public sphere, and you know, it's much more widespread than you think, and I'm going to try to convince you of this during my talk. For example, baked Lays, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on just the design of this little bag here. Companies wanted to make sure that they were really appealing to people and not triggering guilt reactions within the brain. You know, the matte finish, the perfect placement of the potato chips, all of this was really, you know, refined neuroscientifically to ensure that people wanted to buy and eat these chips and that they were considered healthy, right? The Weather Channel had all kinds of stuff. They took EEGs, cortical angiograms, things like that. So many different things to figure out what would be the most exciting things that their viewers wanted to see on TV. Daimler, the auto giant behind Mercedes-Benz vehicles, they also spent close to $1 million on designing their cars to have a more quote-unquote humanistic appeal, right? So this right here is eye tracking data, trying to see where people are looking at when they're looking at a car. And to give you a really, I guess, a broader perspective on what this looks like, I have a video for you here, which I think you will find very interesting.
Sorry. Sorry.
So I mean, look at all this. They're tracking attention, skin temperature, heart rate, emotional valence, all of this, one commercial, all of that, right? Now, you might be thinking, okay, I'm still not convinced. You know, you're saying neuroscience is becoming a big thing, neural data is becoming, entering the public sphere. It's everywhere. You know, you're like, oh, I don't believe it, right? Well, I have another video to show you. I got one more. And I think this will be more convincing.
红色是表示你的专注力显示得很高。
Teachers at this primary school in China
蓝色是走神了，
know exactly when someone isn't paying attention.
白色就是你可能跟网络还没有连接好。
These headbands measure each student's level of concentration. The information is then directly sent to the teacher's computer and to parents. The device is made in China and has 3 electrodes, 2 behind the ears and 1 on the forehead. These sensors pick up electrical signals sent by neurons in the brain. The neural data is then sent in real time to the teacher's computer. So while students are solving math problems, a teacher can quickly find out who's paying attention and who's not.
说明这段时间他是有点在那走神的。
A report is then generated that shows how well the class was paying attention. It even details each student's concentration level at 10-minute intervals. It's then sent to a chat group for parents.
就是他可以看到每个人的评分。
Yeah. See, suddenly this headset doesn't look so ridiculous anymore, does it? So, hopefully I've managed to convince you a little bit about how neuroscience has creeped into the public sphere. But now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the potential of neuroscience. You know, where can this technology go, and like how far can it bring us to this digital utopia? There's a lot of companies out here that make stuff similar to this for commercial use. You have something like Emotive, which tries to like basically measure your emotions throughout the day for better wellness and well-being. But right now, the leading frontier that's like pushing this forward is none other than Neuralink. Yeah, Elon Musk's brainchild, where he's trying to develop essentially what is a fully functioning internet-enabled brain-machine interface. So, what are the implications of this? Okay, yeah, he's created this this robot that can surgically implant the electrodes within the brains of rats, and hopefully he wants to apply this technology to humans in the future. Here's another graphic depicting that. This is the rat brain, by the way, and he has like little electrodes entering into the brain. Anyways, now the reason this has been a big deal is that we're pretty good at reading signals from the brain. You know, we have all these technologies that I've shown you, the fMRI, this headset, things like that, that pick up like what we're really thinking and how our brain is, I guess, firing and the electrical activity. But we're not really good at sending signals to the brain. So the question is like, what if we could send signals to the brain? How would this change things, you know? And again, here's an example to really illustrate the potential of that. So let's say I have a friend who's a photographer, and he's out on top of a hill overlooking an ocean landscape, right? Now, he takes this incredible photo. He's having this amazing experience, and he wants to share it with me. So what happens is he sends me a photo, and this is kind of what I see, you know. A little depressing. It's okay. It's fine, you know. But my point is, this really only captures a fragment of the experience, right? Now let's do the same scenario with two neural interfaces, right? So let's say this man here, he's wearing a Neuralink headset, and right now all of the stuff that he's experiencing, his sight, his taste, the fatigue in his muscles, the smell of the ocean breeze, all of that is being converted to electrical signals in his brain. Now, imagine if we had the Neuralink device that could pick up on those signals, right? Picks up on them, sends them over the internet to a device that I'm wearing, right? His sight, his sound, his sense of smell, all of that, right? All of that information is like picked up by the device and sent over the internet to my device. What I would then see as like the device stimulates my own brain is not a picture like this, but rather the view itself, what he's seeing. I would feel the fatigue in his muscles. I would smell the ocean breeze, and I could taste the salt in the ocean, right? It's a little crazy to think about, but it's, you know, this is what I guess the future application of this technology holds. Language via neural interfaces, right? If we think of the way we move around nowadays, transport, you know, cars, planes, things like that, things have changed so much since 10,000 years ago, but language is like very fundamental to the way we communicate with one another, and it hasn't changed. As a technology, it's pretty much the same. You know, we have smartphones that we use to text each other, you know, phone calls, things like that, but we still fundamentally use language to communicate. And you can think of language as having all of these filters. At any time, we have, you know, a billion different thoughts and emotions in our head that we condense into language so that we can really communicate what we're thinking with each other. And like another filter would be like, again, maybe all of that happiness that you were feeling suddenly gets condensed into a smiley face on your smartphone, you know? So there's this loss of information that happens when we're communicating with one another. But with a direct neural brain interface, right, we would bypass all of that, and we'd have pretty much direct brain-to-brain communication. All of those thoughts, emotions, feelings, all of that all the electrical activity in your brain is picked up and conveyed to the other person, right? There's huge implications for this beyond just, like communication. Memory, right? It takes time to remember things. It's only milliseconds, but there is a small lag between like accessing and retrieving memory from our hippocampus. Now, as processing speeds get faster, you could Google something using your neural interface. And the thing is, you could Google it and get the answer so fast, you wouldn't really be able to distinguish between something that you remembered and something that you actually looked up, right? So again, huge implications. I won't go into it too much, but what I'm trying to say, I don't think that this is what we're going to look like, 50 or 100 years in the future. It's possible, but I'm not sure. So the question is, what now? If we're trying to reach this utopia, how can we get there? Because I've described this fantastical world, and I'm sure many of you have all these thoughts and ideas, but how do we really get there? What do we need to do? And now I'm going to end this presentation talking about fear, the Frankenstein factor that's mentioned in Soggetti's digital report on happiness, and a little bit about the new generation. Now, again, this is one of the hurdles I was talking about earlier about getting to this technology. So Pew Research did a study on Americans expressing fear about all these genetic, or I guess we could call them augmentations to our perception of reality. And people are actually more scared of putting a chip in our brain than they are of things like synthetic blood or gene editing babies and CRISPR technology, right? Now, I can understand that, but it's strange to me as a neuroscientist because I think of us already as like cyborgs, right? And I'm going to try and, I wanted to know how, I guess, this fear of like BMIs came to be. And I think a lot of it does relate a bit to media portrayal. I think most of the people in this room have seen The Matrix. You have this dystopian, terrifying view of like how messing with technology can ultimately lead to like disastrous consequences. And more recently, shows like Black Mirror, which show us the terrifying prospect of like future technology like this. And I'm not saying that these people are wrong. I think it's smart and it's right to be afraid of the future. But ultimately, we need to embrace it and understand that there are good companies out there, like Neuroware, which are trying to make stuff like this, and really ultimately help progress our understanding and our ability to communicate with one another, right? Other companies, Greg Gage in Backyard Brains, he's a neuroscientist who actually did a TED Talk on how to control someone else's arm using your brain. Very interesting. And he had this company called Backyard Brains, which essentially attempted to put a little chip on top of cockroaches so you could control them via your smartphone. And this is what that looks like. So. As you can see, he can like move the cockroach around by like playing around with a smartphone. They have very simple nervous systems, which is why this is possible. So stuff like this, I can understand why people get scared, like I'm sure a lot of you are imagining now we're going to have like, a zombie army of like brain-controlled people, but I want to assuage these fears a little bit and like reassure you that, this is not what's going to happen. So for example, cochlear implants, right? We're already cyborgs. We have brain implants and things like this in our bodies, and it's not like things are taking a turn for the worse, Deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's patients. Again, these are things to neuroscientists that really make us think that we're really already integrated and like fused with technology. It's not something new. This is a photo of Matt Eagles. He was one of the youngest diagnosed cases of Parkinson's in the world. I think he was diagnosed at 7. And through his deep brain stimulation implant, he's been able to live this long and survive to this day, like leading essentially what is like a normal and healthy life. So, this technology doesn't necessarily need to be used for, like, I guess, bad purposes. Like, there's a lot of good that we can accomplish using this. And there are everyday neural enhancements you and I use all the time. I'm sure none of you could survive without your smartphones. In a sense, it's almost like an external processing unit and a memory bank for those things that we can't remember. The coffee you had in the morning is a direct stimulant for your brain, and the ibuprofen you'll need after this talk will help calm you down. Again, direct stimulant to your brain. So are we going to surrender to technology and, I guess, lose to our AI overlords and all of this? I don't think so. I think that instead that we will integrate and merge with technology. That's my goal, at least. And I know that right now I'm up here, I sound like a child. I'm probably the youngest person in this room. I think I'm definitely the youngest person in this room, actually. So if you can't trust me, I will say that there are other, larger, more experienced neuroscientists who believe the same. This is Kafui Zurasa, who also believes that neural data and augmentation is the future of the field. Daniel Amen, he's trying to use fMRI scanning to start doing more medical diagnoses and push that data out into the, medicalization. So question now, what is your role in this digital society? What can you do to help contribute? And this is the little quick thing. So according to the brain, right, this molecule over here, this is oxytocin, and oxytocin is equal to trust, right? This is a neuroscientifically, quote-unquote, proven thing, right? I'm oversimplifying, but that's the general gist of this. This was a study published by the Harvard Business Review, which basically they had two participants. They were random strangers. They had to conduct business with each other, and they found that participants dosed with oxytocin were more trusting of one another, right? And unsurprisingly, they published a study which, it's something that we all knew, right? And a lack of trust equals a lack of productivity in corporations. And more importantly, a lack of trust equals a lack of happiness in corporations. So we don't want that, right? In this digital report that Sogetti published, they talked about trust and the new generation, right? And we're seen as this, post-materialistic, this weird, strange generation that, it's post-realism, all of that fancy video at the start of this talk, right? But ultimately, there's been this decentralization of trust where we don't trust corporations. Bitcoin, Airbnb are examples. I don't need to go into this. But the message I want to leave with all of you today is that, before I end, I do want to have some acknowledgements. Michaela Menno for helping me, prepare this talk and understand this corporation. Garrett Carter helped with the coding of this device, and this is my dad, always supporting me, as well as many others who have helped in this talk. Again, so trust in the new generation, right? I would say rather than trust and the new generation, trust in the new generation, okay? Trust us to build the future because, ultimately, we're what's coming up. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shravan. So, many interesting questions here. You said something that living in the US changes your brain. I'm sure
yep.
we all know some examples of where that is definitely the case. But so what you described, and you only scratched the surface, right, of this new area or a relatively new area of neuroscience, and we're still breaking through and finding out new stuff all the time. And I know that technology is not good or bad either, but it's not neutral as well. So who is in control? And especially from a view of you as this must be very uncomfortable, actually.
I'm enjoying it.
Are you enjoying it? Okay. So who do you think is in control, or has to be in control? Who can develop the wisdom of making the right choices here?
Yeah, so I will say, as with any technology, I think once it's developed, you cannot undevelop a technology. In terms of who's to control this stuff, it's hard to say.
But should we trust big tech companies or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or?
So somebody's going to be making these devices, and I think as a society, it's the people in this room really. You guys are the CEOs, the CTOs. You're the people who ultimately we're going to have to trust to really lead us into making these devices for the benefit of humanity rather than the downfall. So I would say that giving talks like these and being able to talk with the older generation who right now is in power and able to make these decisions, that's very important. So because ultimately everyone in this room, they're the ones who are going to be in control of this. So
for now.
For now.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I am here. Yeah.
Okay. So last question. So I like this question about this. So the iPhone. So
these are all amazing questions.
When will my iPhone? Is it iPhone 12 or iPhone 15 or iPhone 20 that will have a built-in brain interface?
You know, I'd like to think that once we have brain interfaces, we won't really need an iPhone because there's nothing.
It's just a little implant.
Yeah, iPhones are slow. You know, you have to slowly use 2 thumbs, type them out. Why would I do that when I can just think of what I want? You know. So, will your iPhone have a brain interface? I think the question is, will your brain interface have Apple features, quote unquote? So.
That's really something to think about. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.